Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. There are 12 states in the country that have actually restored employment to pre-COVID levels. Yes, folks, you heard that right. Employment is back to the same level or above pre-pandemic levels in a dozen US states. Compared with February 2020, Arizona has actually added the most non-farm jobs on its payrolls, followed by Florida, Utah, Wisconsin, and Oregon, according to brand new data that was released by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. Let's take a look at this chart on your screen. Job gainers and losers. In 12 states, more people were employed in December 2021 than in February 2020. And in 5 states, 2 million fewer individuals had jobs. In an additional 20 states plus the District of Columbia, payrolls are within 50,000 jobs of recovering. What that means is in those 20 states, including DC, the jobs are almost back entirely compared to pre-COVID. Now, the remaining states are collectively missing about 3.5 million jobs, and these are concentrated, as you can imagine, in 3 of the most populated states, California, New York, and Pennsylvania, including Michigan. California alone is about 750,000 jobs short of its pre-COVID level. This data actually reveals how uneven the recovery has been in the labor market, and most missing jobs are actually located along the coasts. Now, why is this actually happening, folks? It may be happening because of A, population, and B, because of migration away from the coastal areas as a direct result of the pandemic. In fact, data shows that a net 8,600 people over 16 actually left New York every month for the last 22 months. Now, in contrast, the population actually grew in Texas, Florida, and Arizona. In fact, the net gain in Texas equates to more than 950 people per day during that period. So let's take a look at this chart on your screen that shows you the population flows. The largest projected population loss is actually in New York and in Illinois. So what is happening, folks, is because the country is fundamentally changing, because individuals are migrating away from the coastal areas like New York, like California, those states are actually having more joblessness. In fact, they have more unemployed people and they have more jobs that are actually not filled. That is pretty ironic when you think about it. This is a state that actually wants people, and I'm talking about New York in particular now, and people actually leaving the state. On the other hand, people are migrating away from such states towards other states where employment has indeed returned to pre-COVID levels. So when there are jobs in a state, it's not necessarily because people in that state are deciding not to work. It's actually happening because people in large part are moving away from that state, because pandemic migration actually plays a role in all of this. This is pretty incredible if you actually think about it, and also if you take into consideration population growth, because what's been happening is that the population is growing in some states and actually declining in other states. In fact, like I mentioned earlier, the population actually grew in states like Texas, Florida, and Arizona. In fact, 950 people more per day moved to Texas in the past few months. So if you really think about this entire situation, you'll understand how uneven the pandemic recovery has been throughout the country. Some states are simply doing better than others. I've been doing videos since the start of the pandemic, and I've told our viewers and subscribers about the fact that individuals with higher education levels were doing better. In fact, individuals in travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality were not doing as well. But now what is happening is that everybody is starting to do better, but people are actually moving away from certain states towards other states. Now, one of the reasons I would imagine people move away from states like New York and California is high state taxes. In fact, New York actually taxed individuals who came to New York to help during the pandemic simply because they worked in New York for a few days or a few weeks, even though they were not New York residents. This makes things very difficult for individuals who work in New York and California, because you're paying significantly higher taxes than you normally would, even if in the case of New York, you were not even a resident of New York, but you just came to New York maybe to help during the pandemic as perhaps a healthcare giver. So this actually creates a situation where different states are doing better. People are migrating away from some states towards other states, and in some states, the situation is back to normal. People are employed to the same extent that they were prior to the pandemic, and this creates an unusual situation wherein certain states are doing better than others, and it has nothing to do with the industry. It has nothing to do with travel, leisure, entertainment, and hospitality. It has to do with pandemic migration and the population in that state. Now, I want to know from our viewers and subscribers where you are located. Type out in the comment section below in which state you're located, because I want to know from our viewers and subscribers which state you're located in and whether you've been able to get your job back or whether you found a different job. I want to get a real-time analysis from our subscribers, from our community, as to which state you're located in and whether you've got your job back, because the data suggests that individuals in certain states are doing much better than others regardless of their occupation, because certain states simply have returned to pre-pandemic levels of employment. So again, let me know in the comment section below which state you're located in and whether you've got your job back or not. Also, let me know if you're aware of any friends or family members in some of these states that I mentioned and whether they're going through the same struggles and challenges if they're in a coastal state like New York, Pennsylvania, or California, or whether they're doing just fine. Let's say, for example, they're in a state like Texas or Florida. Let me know in the comment section below, because I believe the collective insight of our community is much, much greater, much, much more important than me giving you the information. We can all learn from each other together, because at the end of the day, the goal of the Ignition Time channel is to explore everything that's happening in the country, the economy, as well as our money. Do you believe and do you agree with the fact that some states have recovered, partly because of their policies, partly because of population growth, and partly because of pandemic migration? Or do you believe that this is something the media is telling us, this is a tale that the media is spinning simply to get us more compliant and to get us to stop asking questions? Remember, the content in this episode of Ignition Time came from the US Department of Labor Statistics, so this was reported by Bloomberg News. I'll provide you with the resource to this episode of Ignition Time, to the content for this episode of Ignition Time in the description section below. So make sure you check it out. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. I appreciate you. Please click the like button. Please click subscribe. Please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.